Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. I'm Senator Kevin Avard, your host. And today we're going to be talking politics as we usually do on this show. And we have a candidate for Executive Council from District 4. And her name is Terese Grinnell. Grinnell. Yeah. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
So that's a big bite. You're jumping into it. You're fresh. You've never done this before?
So my background, of course, that's probably the biggest interest if I was having to figure out who I'm voting for. Mm-hmm. I grew up with my dad listening to Rush Limbaugh. I've been a Republican all my story. I am actually a registered nurse and a foster mom. And always been interested in politics, but I had a pretty big ministry going on with partnering the community with the needs of kids that were in state care. So I kind of had that realm going on, and I was kind of screaming to the wind, everyone needs to get licensed to help these kids, and get them into a family setting with a dog and all. But at the same time, I kind of kept a pulse on what was going on politically, and I was working with kids out of the Sununu Center, so I knew that we had a lot of dysfunction and a lot of things that were broken here in New Hampshire. But at the same time, kind of going down my journey, before I became a registered nurse at age 32, I had been in finance, and I had been in corporate America for 20 years, and I managed a $6 billion portfolio for Washington Mutual, director, one of their youngest directors, and did a lot of contract work and project management and leadership and all of that. So, one thing led to another. Truly, my experience was all birthed out of the pandemic. So seeing my boys, have to go remote learning. They both came out of foster care and were adopted, so they've got developmental delays. And I had to put them in with the Boys and Girls Club for emergent placement because I was critical job having to work as a nurse during the pandemic. And then one of the directors there was caught in a pedophile sting. So I had that going on with my boys. I was one of the school board moms. And then I turn around and I have my clinicians, my peers, who are 28 years on the job, and they're getting their religious exemptions denied. And their husband's going through a chemo, and they're going to lose their health insurance, and they're already COVID recovered. And I'm actually walked right into Water Street and said, what are we doing here in New Hampshire?
Why was their religious exemption denied? Do you know?
Absolutely. So I helped write over 300 religious exemptions for health clinicians through the 2-year span of the pandemic. And every HR seemed to have a different form. Some were a single page, some were 10 pages, some needed to be signed by a pastor, some didn't need to be signed by a pastor. We'd write the same one for 2 different employees at the same HR. One would get approved and one would get denied. And the only rationale we could come to was that one employee was easier to replace than the other. So it wasn't being done constitutionally. It wasn't being looked at even with a set of standards that had any sort of uniformity.
Was there any civil litigation that went on with that?
Oh, there's, yes. And there's actually been cases that have finally been won in other states. But here we are 2 years later.
Right.
So in the meantime, you've got the single mom with 2 kids, or the one who's 28 years on the job at Concord Hospital, 2 years from retirement and her pension, and her husband's going through ocular chemotherapy for cancer in his eye. What is she going to do?
We know that some of the universities were doing that as well, and some recanted, some went back, and of course they still made it difficult for the people that chose to use that route. Yep. Having to be tested and whatnot, but. Now the CDC comes out with these new recommendations that if you've had it, you don't have to quarantine, you don't have to wear the mask. It's something's not right.
But at the same time, just yesterday I had a clinician call me and she said they're asking for the 5th booster. And I so wish I would have done what you did, Terese. I basically said, I need my religious exemption or I'm going to go back to finance. Mm-hmm. I'm going to fall back on my previous career. And I had mine approved, so I was very blessed in that. Yeah. But I was advocating for all those around me, that holding people in my arms that are crying because they're losing everything, even neurologists and
How many nurses have lost their jobs because they didn't want to go this route?
So many just organically left the field. The one that I had call me yesterday, they're requiring her 5th booster. And she's like, I just can't do it. My body can't tolerate this. No. And so she is leaving healthcare altogether. So there's still waves of people who are choosing to get out of the profession, which is horrible because now when I need to go to the ER with one of my boys, the wait time is, you're not the clinicians aren't there to help our families. So I actually went into Water Street, which is the New Hampshire GOP's office on Main Street in Concord. And I went in, I'm like, we've got a Republican governor and House and Senate. Like, how is this happening? This is not constitutional. This is not okay. How do I get involved? What do I need to do? And I remember sitting down with Moya at the table, and she gave me a few organizations. And then I remember this young veteran dad standing up and saying, you know, my wife's going through nursing school. She's pregnant. It's her last semester at Plymouth. She's losing her job at Dartmouth. Plymouth won't let her do her clinical. She's not going to get to graduate. When is somebody going to do something? And meanwhile, I'm looking at my two boys who aren't getting educated. And I switched jobs. I was blessed that I was able to take a night job as a hospice nurse for a small agency. So I'm on call from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. And God blessed me with all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, the day's free. And I did that so I could remote or homeschool my boys if I needed to.
Right.
School opened back up. They didn't need to wear their masks. They went back to regular normalcy, which is really important for me with my boys. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with my day? Like, Lord, what do you want me to do with this?
Yeah.
I'm getting paid 6 figures to sleep. What do you want me to do with my day? And I live 6 miles from the Capitol. So I started going down and just really understanding who are our elected. How does the process work? What is the executive council?
So for our viewers' understanding, I am always surprised how many people do not understand the role of the executive council, how it came to be, and what does it do?
Sure.
Yeah.
Great question. So New Hampshire is very unique. Most states have a lieutenant governor. Here in New Hampshire, we have 5 executive council members. They are to be the voice and the eyes for the people in Concord. They also are the gatekeepers for contracts and any federal money that we should accept if there's line items there. So I work hard for my money. I send a lot of money down to Washington, right, in the IRS. I want to get that money back. But what happened to me in October last year is I identified that we were taking federal funds, $25 million, that had a line item that if we accepted that grant money, we would be obligated if at any point in time the federal government deemed a population a health hazard, that we would have to isolate and quarantine them. So that's, if Biden and Harris deemed a population of us a health hazard, we would be obligated to isolate and quarantine people. And in the meantime, in Australia, people were actually having to go to camps.
Right.
So that was very terrifying
That's
language
scary.
for me to see. And at the same time, I become knowledgeable enough to know that we had a $400 million surplus. So we didn't really need that money in the state of New Hampshire, especially with something that might isolate and quarantine people in this agenda that's, quite frankly, scary.
It is scary. And one thing is when the federal government hands you back money to the states, there's usually strings attached.
There's always a trap to that cheese, right?
There's a trap to that cheese.
Yeah.
And you really are better off if you can do it without it, not to do it.
So the awareness that the Executive Council is kind of the gatekeeper. I was at Concord this morning at the legislative, the LOB, and the committees were again voting on federal grant money for Department of Health and Human Services. They voted to pass it, so now it will go to the Executive Council to take a look at it. So, it's kind of that last line of defense to say, no, this is not okay for the people here in New Hampshire. This is our sovereignty. This is our constitutional liberties and rights. And we really don't necessarily need that program or to really ask the hard questions before we take that money in. The other key piece about the Executive Council that's really imperative that people understand is that they also appoint a lot of positions. So commissioners, judges. I was actually arrested for uttering the word amen a year ago. I've had 5 court hearings. There's absolutely no evidence, and yet we don't have a decision. And so when you go a whole year and that was at the Executive Council meeting on October 13th, I was tapped on my shoulder, sitting perfectly quiet. Praise God, I had just sent my 2 boys outside. And it was really a chilling. They didn't want us there observing that vote.
So when are you going to hear a decision on this?
So when am I going to make my decision?
No, when are you going to hear a decision from the courts?
We don't know. We're a year out, and the last hearing was a motion to dismiss, and that was on July 20th. So we're 50 days out, and we still don't have any. So when you have judges that are appointed that don't have integrity, and you have voting machines that people are worried that we don't have voter integrity, and we've got federal government overreach that want to isolate and quarantine us. We need some really strong, principled people. So I'm not a politician, but I will be a good legislator.
Right. Well, you won't legislate. You'll do the executive council part. That's my job.
You will write the legislation and the laws, but as it comes up
Yeah.
and we decide that, yes, it passed, that we want to take this federal money like I saw this morning, it will be up to the executive council, the way the New Hampshire Constitution is written, for anything over $10,000 to say,
One of the things I think it was Senator Clegg, who was running for executive council. He was really concerned about the no bid contracts. People just get this. You get the nod, and that in itself is scary because there's no competition to drive down the cost or to weigh. It's just no bid means you got the contract, and that's an interesting concept, but. It's a concern. I just want to throw out one thing. You get excited, and you said LOB. What is LOB?
Right, sorry. So the legislative office, which is located behind the Capitol, the Dome.
Okay.
There's a building there where our legislators meet, committees meet, and they discuss. In this case, this morning it was Department of Health and Human Services bringing forth requests for grant money.
Yeah. Years ago, in our early history, apparently we didn't have the executive council, and the governors was signing all the contracts, and apparently they got really rich off this. And the people said, you know what, enough of that.
Right.
And so you're basically the gatekeeper to help keep things honest on the executive council side. So you're running for office. You definitely have a passion.
Yes.
And it's for the people. You basically, you have a diverse background, obviously. And did you do the homeschooling? Did you say you did?
I did do the homeschooling for a while. I will be honest, I identified that I am not a teacher. I am a nurse. Max, my youngest, he really had a real rough start. He's a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, at a 3-year-old level. So getting him to really understand how to put his words together. He will take apart a car engine in a heartbeat, but getting him to figure out how to spell cat has been really challenging.
But can he put the car back together?
He probably could. Yeah. This kid is amazing. He's going to be an engineer, but he definitely needs services. So I'm very passionate that we don't leave $45 million on the table. That's our school district's budget at $20,000 a child, and not go in and try and fix that.
Right.
And I know that we didn't get in this tangled mess in a day. We're not going to fix it in a day. But I do believe that property taxes, a majority of our property taxes, and why housing is so expensive here in New Hampshire is because it's going to these schools, and these budgets are just crazy. And in the meantime,
you were on the school board.
I was not on the school board.
Oh, I thought you said you were school board.
I was one of the school board moms that showed up and pitched a fit. Yeah.
Okay.
But we're not teaching math, and we're not teaching writing, and leave it to me whether my boy wants to be called James or Jim or whatever it is. Let me tell you as the parent. But let's focus on those core skills. And our test scores are horrible after 2 years of COVID. We've got money just pouring into our school districts, and yet property taxes are causing people who have paid off their homes with property values going up having to liquidate their homes.
Yeah,
and then you can't find rentals. And so we've got this housing crisis linked to our property tax craziness, and then we've got these schools with just a ridiculous amount of money, and our children are suffering. There's a lot of brokenness going on that really needs somebody to be asking the hard questions and really looking at things very diligently and truly in the game for the people.
I was at an event the other night, and everybody was just saying, "Hey, did you get your assessment?" And mine went up $165,000. Yeah, mine went up this much, and mine went up this much. And which means your property taxes are going to follow that. And when those valuations go down,
you're stuck.
Your property taxes aren't going to go. It's
between inflation.
Oh my gosh!
We all want our money to come back that we paid into the system. But the reality is some of this, it was $200 million, $8 million, $20 million all morning this morning, right? And that's where inflation comes from. Like this money just doesn't come out of nowheres. And then we become more and more dependent on it. One of the questions, one of the senators this morning said, okay, we've been helping everyone with their rental cost through this program and housing. But when that goes away, what's going to happen? Meanwhile, my 20-year-old biological daughter works for one of the hotels in Concord, and she's like, Mom, they're spending $300 a night to put these people up in the hotel, and the people are telling me they don't want the Section 8 housing because they'd rather have their linens changed every morning. Okay, that's the program they were talking about this morning, right? And then I hear that certain entities here in New Hampshire aren't having to pay property taxes, whether it be a Dartmouth Hitchcock, UNH, and that there's been legislation that has gone through to make waivers for some of these big organs. So the single mom who can't get an apartment, who's working 2 jobs, right? Because housing and property taxes are too high for that landlord to give her something affordable. Those property taxes are going to a school system with teachers' unions that are, not accountable. Our kids aren't being taught what we need. We're paying them to be educated, not CRT, not to be, parental choice being vetoed. There's just a lot of stuff here that's going on that is not that, my job will be to be those eyes and ears for the people down there at the Capitol to say time out. I'm running up against an established politician, very good name recognition. It is a David and a Goliath, but I cannot fight for my boys to get out of foster care and adopt them in permanency and them to grow up together after 7 years and give up on their future.
Right.
If it was just about me, I probably wouldn't be putting in the 15, 20 hours a day I've been putting in for the last year since I became aware.
What are you hearing about from constituents, people? You must be out there canvassing. What are you hearing?
There's a huge grassroots that's growing that is starting to really engage and try to understand who is who and what is what. And, part of my heart breaks because what I've realized is the framework is really broken in Concord. We really have some strongholds there that we need to untangle. So we have a lot of good people. $100 to be a state rep for a year, $200 to be that is
$100 for a senator too.
It is for us. So, for someone to dedicate the number of hours you guys have to dedicate to be down there, and the reality is we're realizing that there's good people there that are being strong-armed to do things that, in my opinion, from what I've observed, they need to be set free. So we need to collectively come alongside of you guys, and we need to get in the game and hold everyone accountable. And that, part of it is if I elect someone, I shouldn't have to go babysit that they're doing the right thing for me and my boys. I should be, when I'm hanging an IV bag, you shouldn't have to be worrying about me hanging the IV bag for your mom, right?
I hear
but
that.
The reality is
that as well. But sometimes it's good. We need to hear from people because there are sometimes there's very difficult issues that come before us, and there are groups out there that will sabotage an issue and overload you with an email list, and you'll see it say bulk. Oh. And you're thinking that's a constituent, but that's not a grassroots. It's a lobbyist group or some organization out there that's saying, hey, we all agree and we're all saying the same thing. And come to find out, some of these people don't even know their email's being used.
Yeah. When I've been down at the State House, I'm oftentimes the only constituent, maybe with a Julie Smith, and the rest is all lobbyist. And you guys are just getting bulldozed. What I saw happen in Belknap County a few months ago, maybe it was a month ago, absolutely, just when entities want to come in and force their hand, you guys need people, our legislators need people to be holding their arms up in battle and they need to be involved. And I do see when I'm out, so what I tell people is I look at the voters and they're tired and they're weary and they're overwhelmed and they're scared. Heating costs and everything coming into winter. They're really scared when they look across the world and what's going on. And they want to do, but they don't know what to do. So we saw that with the convoys in Canada, right? Everybody got in their car. They wanted to do something. They had this energy to try and fix something they knew was scary and broken and that their God-given liberties. Down, didn't he? Right. And so they're like, okay, we want to do, but what can we do that's productive?
Right.
And so with that, I did launch a Liberty. I never set out to launch a Liberty group, but we the people, nh.org. And it's basically a grassroots of like-minded people coming together saying, okay, let's vet out who is truly for the people, by the people, the best of the best, who are constitutionalists, who care about our Constitution, God-given rights, what our forefathers wanted. They're not going down this track of justifying that our Constitution is outdated and now we need to go to a global constitution for climate change and all these wonderful ways that they make it sound attractive.
Once your liberty's gone, it's gone.
It's gone. And if we lose it with America, but the beautiful thing, to end on a good note, is we are the live free or die state.
That's right.
We are the most liberty-minded. And you know what we say over ourselves all the time? That we are first in the nation. And we're on granite. We're on solid ground.
Barely.
And very early on, I was out in the barn with my horse, and I just heard the word, how are you going to assemble? If you assemble, you can do anything. And so with that, we did birth something called the Resolve Initiative. And it's basically, if we all assemble together, we truly do our diligence, we start to learn our Constitution, and we start to show up. And
we're seeing these little signs that say resolve.
Yeah.
So that's people getting organized. I think one of the things that it was at another event I was at, and sometimes people will walk up to me, they say, I didn't realize there was this much support out here. I felt so alone. And you're not alone. There are a lot of people, and I think you mentioned Rush Limbaugh, but that's one of the things that he said years ago, that they want to isolate you and make you feel as though, well, because you don't fit in with our group, there's something wrong with you. Well, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You have a gut feeling, and stick with your gut. It's critical that people realize that we're all in this big foxhole, and the aim is liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And that's for everybody equally, not equal outcomes. That's a fake thing. That social equity thing is a very dangerous way of going. We have equal protection under the law. It's the 14th Amendment. You're to be treated equally, no matter what your race, your religion, your creed. It doesn't matter. You're to be treated equally.
Amen. Under
the law. But that doesn't mean, well, if you're driving around in a Mercedes-Benz, I have that right as well. I deserve that. Well, no, I didn't get it because I didn't work for it, or I chose not to.
Right.
There's a different way of seeing things.
Even to simplify it, because I really have always been one to try and bring people together. I was that middle child, so it was the peacekeeper, right? And it's this idea of, do you want to send $20 down to Washington in hopes that any of it comes back to help the person who needs it? Or, like, I would rather take that $20, get the hoodie sweatshirt for the guy who's cold, and go up and give it to him, than to send it to Washington and hope that maybe a few pennies of it will come back. Because money does breed corruption, and the more chains of custody that we have of our funds, the more
a little more hands in the cookie jar.
It just gets lost in the shuffle, and it's really just, it's at the end of the day, I truly believe all of us just want to run through the garden and go fishing, take care of our families,
leave me alone,
go to work, come home, take care of our yards and enjoy our families, right? No matter what side of the fence you are. But there's so much division, there's so much hostility, there's so much angst, there's so much anger, and we really have to rise above. So we really need to have leaders that are willing to say, I see that, and I think we could do better for women. I think that we should make oral contraceptive free, regardless of whether she's waitressing and can't afford to be on the sliding scale, right? Let's prevent that from happening. Let's make better choices for our girls available. At the same time, let's look at what everyone is saying and take all the anger out of it. And are we giving us the best choice with the monies that we do have?
Right.
And how do we want to use these? How do we want to appropriate them? What does make the most sense? And I think that there's, at the end of the day, when you build the relationships and you talk one-to-one with people, some people are just so polar opposite. They just don't want to hear it. They've just shut down, and they've really bought into a narrative that you just can't combat. But I would say that is the minority. It's 1 in 10. Most people you're able to reason with and say, well, what do you think about the gas prices? And what do you think about the heating bills? And are you okay with, us not having our constitutional liberties, and people
I
just
wonder
start
if
to
people
unravel.
really think about their Constitution. I know that there are groups that do, but people get so busy, and it's not like it's on their mind all the time what they are looking at. I was talking at an event the other day, and we went into Applebee's, and one of the waitresses recognized my wife, and we got into a conversation, and she said, I'm going to hairdressing school, and I can just barely get there with the gas money. I'm paying, I'm doing this extra job for the gas money, and that just kind of breaks your heart. So that, these things are real, and they're tender on people's hearts. We got about a minute or so. So how do people get in touch with you, and how do they support you and follow you?
So the fun thing about my campaign is there's absolutely no money involved. So I probably have the David against the Goliath, right? But wethepeoplenh.org. You can see a little bio of me. You can see the video of when I was arrested for uttering the word amen. You can find out what we're doing, the slate of candidates that we've come up with, which we are behind you.
Oh, you are?
Yes,
Nice.
you're on our list. But who we've come up with that has proven to be the most principled, who has proven not to bend a knee, who has worked the best that they can within the framework to do what's right for the people, by the people. And so that's really more important to me than anything. As far as declaring for executive council, should I be elected, I absolutely will be there to do what's right for the people with integrity. And, my heart will be there for a future for my boys. That is my compass. But there is no donation button on the website because we don't want money to be part of what we're doing.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you very much, and
You're
I appreciate the all your efforts and coming out and speaking up. I really appreciate it when people come on the show. I don't ask you if you're Democrat or Republican, did I?
No.
I didn't, and I wouldn't.
I'm conservative Republican.
Yeah.
Vote since I was 18. If anyone's curious.
My point is that you can come on the
matter.
show and for speaking up and getting engaged.
Yeah.
It is part of what we do here, and this show's about you people and giving you a voice. And so if you want to come on the show, just let me know, and we'd love to have you. And I really wish you well, and I hope things go well for you. And with that, we're going to say goodbye because I'm getting the hook. So
Goodbye, all.
Thank you for watching Speaking with the Senator. And if you do like this show, please hit the subscribe button if you're watching it on YouTube, and like and share it. It helps us get a little bit more recognition. So with that, thank you very much.
Stay free, guys.